Monica, and kick it off. I know we're already at the 6 o'clock mark, and say bienvenidos. Welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for joining us in this very, very important conversation and training around understanding hate crimes and combating white supremacy. It truly is an honor to be here with ADL, with Monica Bauer, who leads all of the work with the Latino community across the country. And Monica really is going to be diving in terms of, how you define a hate crime, how can we as Latinos understand those nuances that are so important, and also how do we combat white supremacy? It's something that, we have been seeing now for several years in terms of hate crimes rising, but also on the 1-year anniversary of El Paso, how can we be better equipped and better trained to understand these different factors, and how can we play an active role? And so with that, Monica, mil gracias for always being so willing to join and partner with LULAC. We know how amazingly important this is. And so I'm going to turn it over to you if you would just like to introduce yourself a little bit in terms of your background and what you're doing at ADL, and then kick it off. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you, Sindy. Thank you for the invitation. I feel so honored to be among all the LULACeros, like I've heard people refer to LULAC members. For me, it's a great honor to participate and be here with you and provide this information from the ADL. As Sindy was mentioning, I'm the Director of Hispanic Affairs for the Anti-Defamation League, and I'm just thrilled to be here. I'm an immigrant from Mexico, and I've been in this country for the last 20 years, and I've had just the honor to go into this path of being part of the civil rights movement in the 21st century. So I'm so excited to be here and to help in my communities, be more informed about these issues. So we're going to touch on 2 different things. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. I want everybody to let me know that you are able to see it. Okay, I hope, yeah, okay, good. And then I'm going to wait. Okay, so you can see that my screen. So we're going to touch today, we're going to talk about 2 different things. We're going to talk about hate crimes, and then we're going to talk about white supremacy ideology and a few best practices of something that we as a community can do. So let's start just by introducing ADL. My organization was created in 1913 with a mission to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and secure justice and fair treatment to all. And that's the mission that has been driving us for more than 100 years as an anti-hate organization. That's what we do. We fight hate every single day. And as that, we partner with LULAC every day to help curb and combat hate against all communities and keep communities safe. So we have 25 regional offices around the country. And we cover with those 25 offices, the national, the 50 states, and also Puerto Rico, of course. So that's the way we work through our 25 regional offices. Okay, let's go to the next one. Okay, so when I talk about ADL being an anti-hate organization, we get the question of, so how do you fight hate? So your mission is to fight hate, but how do you do it? So we basically have 3 strategies that we use to fight hate. The first one is investigation, and I will touch a little bit more on this strategy as we move along with the topic of white supremacists. But we have a center on extremism that investigates, monitors, and tracks extremism on the ground and online, because as we know now, haters not only do activities in our communities, but are also in the web, online. And that's really, really scary. That's another of the landscapes that our investigators work on. What our Center on Extremism produces is intelligence and reports that we share with elected officials, but also with law enforcement. And thanks to that information, we are able to, in many cases, stop attacks. So just FYI, since El Paso, there's been 18 attempts, plots by extremism to hurt communities that have been foiled, thank God. So that's just the kind of work our Center on Extremism
extremism does every day. The other strategies that we use is advocacy. We work in coalitions to, write legislation in the state and federal to move forward legislation to protect communities. And then we have education. That's our third one. We have a very large operation. We have a director of education in each one of our regional offices that works with schools on anti-bias programs. We believe that if we can bring this kind of education to students, then hate doesn't escalate, and we can stop hate before it takes a hold in people's hearts and minds. So those are the three strategies that we use. Now, let's go into what is a hate crime, which is the topic of today. We want to be able to know the definition, identify a hate crime, and know what to do. So what is a hate crime? A hate crime is, first of all, a criminal act. So in order to have a hate crime, we need to have a criminal act. So that can be vandalism, assault, arson, any kind of criminal act against a person or a property. So this can be against one individual, or it can be a group of people, or it can be against a synagogue, a mosque, a gay club. So person or property, when the victim is intentionally selected because of the victim's actual or perceived religion, race, national origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. So these characteristics that I just mentioned are what we call the immutable characteristics of an individual. So a person is targeted not because of something they did, but for something that they are. So that's really the definition of what a hate crime is. You've been targeted because of your national origin, your race, your gender, one of any of these characteristics. Now, I use a lot of examples in these trainings because I feel that those are the ones that really clarify the definition. So here we're gonna ask the question, is this a crime or a hate crime? So on the left side, you have the image of an ice cream shop, a Baskin Robbins, and let's say that it has, somebody came to that store and wrote, "I love you," with a spray paint. So is this a crime? Yes, it is a crime because it's vandalism. Is this a hate crime? No, it's not a hate crime because it's not targeting that institution, that place, because of one of the reasons that I just mentioned. Now let's look at the example to the right. We have also an ice cream shop, but in this case, it's called La Michoacana, a name that most people would immediately know that it's a Latino ice cream shop. And let's say it's vandalized with a message down there that says, "Go back to Mexico." Do we have a crime? Yes, we have the same crime as the example before. It's the crime of vandalism. But in this case, the victim was selected specifically because of the national origin. And the message is a hateful message. So there would be no question that the example on the right has to be investigated as a hate crime. So I hope that helps distinguish between a crime and a hate crime. So let's just remember that that's the basic thing. We have to have a crime. It has to be inspired on bias, and the victim was selected because of one of the characteristics that we just mentioned. Now, I don't know if you remember, but in the example, in the definition, we said that it can be real or perceived. So there's also the issue that when a perpetrator does a hate crime, this person might think that somebody is gay and they want to target him because he's gay, but they might be mistaken. So is this a hate crime or not, if they're mistaken? So let me use two examples. In the left side, you see a gentleman, his name is Rana Singh. He's holding the picture of his brother. His brother, Balbir Singh, was the first victim of hate crime after the terrorist attack of 9/11. An individual wanted to have revenge because of the terrorist attack and decided to go to this gas station where Balbir was working, and he murdered him. This gentleman, Balbir, he was not a Muslim, but the attacker perceived him as being a Muslim. This gentleman is from the Sikh religion. So is this a hate crime or is not a hate crime? But by the definition of a hate crime, it is a hate crime because it doesn't matter that the attacker got it wrong. He was motivated by hate and he did a crime. So it is a hate crime. On the example on the right side, this individual who is a member of the Ku Klux Klan, decided to go and kill Jews. So he went to a Jewish center to kill Jews. He actually murdered the 3 victims that you see in the picture. None of them were Jewish. So same thing. His motivation to go and kill people was anti-Semitism. He wanted to kill Jews. And the fact that the victims were not Jewish, it's still a hate crime. So that's the examples to show you what we mean in the definition by real or perceived. Now, there's a lot of, it's very important to understand what's the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident. And sometimes people refer to hate crimes like bias-motivated crime. When we use bias-motivated or hate, it's the same thing. So these 2 definitions just mean the same thing. It's what is hate crime versus hate incident. So what's the difference? Let's look at the definitions. So if you see both definitions, they're basically the same, except for the red letters. So one is a criminal act, and the other one is a non-criminal act. So a hate incident, it's still motivated by bias against a person or a property, and the victim is still intentionally selected because of the victim's actual or perceived race, religion, national origin, gender, gender identity, sexual orientation, or disability. But it's not a hate, it's not a crime. So let's use some examples because that really helps. So here we have the same graph, but we see a criminal act. We have vandalism with a very hateful message. And on the left, we have a flyer. So on the left, we have a crime because it's vandalism. On the left, it's flyering, it's a hate incident. We clearly see that the message is a message of hate, but because it's a flyer, it's not a crime. It's a hate incident. So that would be the difference between a hate crime and a hate incident. We get a lot of people, come and try to report, let's say, a hate incident, but it's not. I'm sorry, a hate crime, but it's a hate incident. Some examples of hate incidents, and a very common one is hate speech. We get this all the time. We hear people saying, he told me this because I'm from the LGBT community, or go back to Mexico, or just speak Spanish, just speak English. We don't accept Spanish here. That would be hate speech. And hate speech is not a crime. Hate speech is a hate incident. The hate rallies. Here we have a picture of the Charlottesville rally. The rally itself was a hate incident, was not a hate crime. We had during those day and a half of the rallies in Charlottesville several hate crimes, like the murder of Heather Heyer, but the rally itself was a hate incident. A display of offensive material, distribution of hate flyers. This we see a lot, and we're going to talk a little bit more about flyers in a few slides. So those are hate incidents. So hate crimes have a double impact. And this is why we have special laws regarding hate crimes, because they impact the individual victims, but they also impact their community. They have a terroristic nature, and they attack people for who they are, not what they've done. So again, they're attacking these characteristics that we talked about that are part of your identity. So think about we're commemorating the 1-year anniversary of El Paso, and we can think about the people who were in that Walmart and the people who got affected tremendously because being injured or having a death in their families. And that's, I don't have words to express the tragedy that happened to those people. But the impact was not only on those people, was also on the whole community. The whole El Paso community was affected. The whole Latino community, Hispanic community, Mexican American community was affected. Mexico was affected. So these kinds of crimes have an impact on the whole community. And that's why we always say these are message crimes. Hate crimes, we call them message crimes because the message is we don't want you here. We want you out of our neighborhood, out of our country. It's a message to the whole community, not only the individual or the family. And I'm very sad that I had a different picture in this presentation, an older picture, and I inserted this picture because this happened on August 2nd. This happened on Sunday in Georgia. So we see that these kinds of hate crimes and hate incidents are happening in our country every single day. So it's thank God we haven't seen something as tragic and as terroristic as a shooting, But these kinds of graffiti, hate speech, we see it all the time. And this is a very recent example. Now, the people who live in that neighborhood, you can imagine how scared they are. If they're Latinos or they're Mexicans, how scared they are, because the message is, we don't want you here. We don't want you in our community.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about hate crime laws, okay? So it's important. Okay, so let me tell you first how they work. So how these laws work is that there's something called penalty enhancement. Remember the example we talked about, the two ice cream places? One was a crime because it was vandalism, the other one was a hate crime. So what happens is, if the crime of vandalism in that place would have been, let's say, 3 months then if the prosecution can prove that there was bias involved, then the penalty is enhanced. So the way these laws are written is that you get an extra penalty because you did this crime out of hate. That's the way they work. So the prosecution has to prove that there was hate involved.
And that's where the victim, witnesses, the community can sometimes help the prosecution make that case.
So basically we have the federal law, which is the Matthew Shepard James Berg Jr. Hate Crime Prevention Act of 2009. And this federal law has the name of two hate crime victims
that were killed in 1998. Matthew Shepard, who was a gay young man who was tortured in Wyoming and killed, and James Berg Jr., an African-American man in Texas that was killed by white supremacists in a really horrible way. So those victims, to honor those victims, the federal law has their names. We have state hate crime laws. Georgia just really recently passed their hate crimes law, and we're so proud and happy that they finally have a hate crime law. Right now, we have 46 states in the District of Columbia that have hate crime laws, and there's 4 states that do not: Arkansas, Indiana, South Carolina, and West Virginia. Please, I mean, we want to, with our coalition partners, we want to move this forward. It's really important that every state has a hate crime law. You will see that there are different colors in this map. You can go to our website, adl.org, and look at hate crime map. And if you have your mouse on the state that you're interested in, you're going to be able to see the statute and also what's covered and what's not covered, because not every single state covers every single one of the categories that I mentioned. So we are also trying to have every single hate crime state law to be comprehensive. So those are things that we're working on. But you can definitely go in our website if you want more information on what's happening in your state.
Now, potential indicators. We spoke about how a prosecution needs to make the case that there was bias involved. So the indicators is the evidence. So
the investigators, the prosecution is going to look for this evidence that can show that this crime was motivated by hate. So what are they looking for? What are these indicators that are going to help make the case? So of course, there's graffiti, there's tattoos, there's location. We're going to talk a lot about language, but there's different things that can help the prosecution determine this case. And we, as witnesses or as victims, can try to remember everything. It's really important. If you ever have if you ever have to support a community member that has gone through something like this, you have to ask a lot of questions. Did you see anything on their jacket? Did you see any tattoo? Did you see a bumper sticker in their car? Anything that can indicate that this might be this person might be associated with hateful ideology or a hate group. Some of these symbols, and we have a hate symbols database in our website, don't seem hateful to us because we don't know them. So that's really important too. If you remember that he had, I don't know, an eagle with a collar, you have to tell this to the investigator because it may not mean anything to you, but to somebody who understands these hate symbols, it may be exactly the thing that ties them to a hate group. That's why it's so important to try to remember everything. And right now, all of us have a machine in our pockets that can record, we can take pictures, video, and maybe just taking a picture of the car, a picture of their jacket, a picture, anything can help an investigator maybe to find this link between the perpetrator and any hate group or hateful ideology. That's really important.
There's also the language indicators. It's really important to remember everything that was said, even before the attack. You know, sometimes before somebody hits you or something, they say things, and sometimes
they're very horrible words, and the victims feel very uncomfortable repeating those words that people told them while they were attacking them. But it's really important to remember what the words were, how many times there were, you know, the people told them those words. Sometimes I think with immigrant communities that maybe don't know these specific words, or they don't know English well, it's harder because they don't know, but it's really important to repeat these words and to try to make sense of if it can show the link with hate and bias. So it's really important to remember as much as possible and write everything down. And now we're going to go into statistics and reporting. And it's really, well, the first thing is we cannot address what we cannot measure. So that's why statistics are really important. Most of all, in our community, in the Latino community, this is really important because most people, or I won't say most, but a lot of people don't report for many reasons. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. But a lot of community members that are victims or witnesses of hate crimes do not report. And so we don't have a very accurate numbers on these issues. So it's the community members that do not report, and sometimes law enforcement agencies do not report to the FBI, because the FBI is the agency that publishes the statistics every year. So this is not exactly up to date, but it's important for you to know that these hate crimes have been on the rise since 2008, and we've seen a big spike in hate crimes starting in 2015. So a lot of hate brewing right now. Let's say when the pandemic started, we saw a lot of hate crimes against the API, the Asian American community, and we've seen just a rise in hate crimes against Latinos, immigrants, Jewish community, Muslim community, just a big spike in hate crimes. Here I couldn't copy everything from the FBI report, but I tried to show you the comparison from year to year. So in the category of racial, ethnicity, national origin bias, the community that's most targeted, it's the Black community. And you can see the number for the anti-Hispanic hate crimes. And I think it's important to show you that we know, the people that are part of the community, that these numbers cannot reflect what we hear from our neighbors and our friends. People are just not reporting, and that's why we see these low numbers. In the religious bias category, the hate crimes, the group that is most affected is the Jewish community. And the third category most affected is the LGBTQ community. So why do victims don't report? And I'm sure all of you can answer this question really easily. And there's the issue of language. There's a lot of distrust of government and police. People are very scared about having maybe a member of their family who's undocumented and don't want police investigating or coming to their house or asking questions. A lot of the community doesn't even know there's such thing as hate crimes, or maybe they don't know they exist or they don't think it's serious. A lot of people that are victims of hate crimes say, "Oh, okay, so they just pushed me and did this to me, but thank God I didn't have to go to the hospital or anything like that." So sometimes I feel that we hear about the worst hate crimes, the ones that ended up in the hospital, and then media covers them, and then we hear about them. But the ones that are not very serious, we don't hear about them because people don't report. There's a lot of fear of retaliation. And then there's also the issue of some people not feeling that they cannot share that part of their identity. For example, if there is a hate crime on a gay bar, for example, and people want to, police wants to investigate, some people don't come forward. Maybe their family doesn't know that they were at the gay bar and they're probably gay, so they don't want to share that part of their identity. So that happens as well. So there's several reasons why victims don't report. Now, responding. Let's talk about how to respond. it's really important to listen to what happened. And as I said, gather as much information as possible and ask all those questions. Imagine you need to know everything, because the sooner, right after the incident happened, is when probably you remember that tattoo, or that, you can remember the most. Ask the victims what they want to do, because sometimes maybe they want to report to a civil rights organization, not necessarily go to law enforcement. So you have to think about what to do, what should you do. Talk to them about evidence, anything. Right now, a lot of these things happen on social media. It's really important to take screenshots of, if they were, for example, threatened through social media, for example. So anything that can help the prosecution and that can help show how the case, what really happened. And then, of course, you can refer the victim to an organization that can help them, and then determine what's best. Our offices are always open if you want to discuss a case, because unfortunately, we at the ADL have a lot of experience with hate crimes. Actually, I didn't mention this when we talk about hate crime law, but ADL wrote the model hate crime law in 1981. So we've been in this fight against hate crimes since our inception, and because different incidents, but one seminal incident that happened in 1913, where a Jewish man was a victim of a hate crime. So we've been involved with this for a long time. So I want to show you, this is a campaign, a social media campaign that's called Denuncia el Odio. We have a very close partnership with the Mexican government and the 50 Mexican consulates in the US. And we have this information in English and in Spanish that you can use in your social media, just explaining what a hate crime is in a really easy way, and letting people know that if they feel comfortable, they should report to police. But if in any case they don't feel comfortable, they can report at the consulate or at the ADL. And we have this information as you see it, but also in videos in English and in Spanish, which is available to everybody. And with this, we are ending the first part of our training, and now we're going to start with white supremacy's anti-immigrant ideology. So, okay, so it's going to get really dark really soon, as you can see from the image. The first thing that you should know about white supremacist ideology is that their mantra is it's covered in these 14 words, and they're called the 14 words. And this is the way they think. It's we must secure the existence of our people and a future for white children. Those are the 14 words. And if you ever see a tattoo that's 14, I mean, I don't want to say all tattoos that are 14, that's what it means, but it related to white supremacists, it goes back to the 14 words, which is this cosmovision of the way they see the world. Many times the number 14 is also next to the 88. The number 88 means Heil Hitler. The reason why it means that is because the H is the 8th word of the alphabet. So 88 means HH, which means Heil Hitler. So okay, so this is basically the way they see it. But they see themselves, and this is really important to understand, as the victims of a demographic change. They don't feel as perpetrators, they feel as victims. They think there's a demographic change in the country with immigrants and people who are not white, and that they're gonna become extinct. And that's why they feel they have to do something about it. And as you can see in this image, it talks about that. You will remember that at Charlottesville, people with the torches were shouting, "You will not replace us." So they're talking about people of color replacing the white race. And in this ideology, they see Jews as helping bring this multiculturalism to America. So that's why they're very anti-Semitic, and they're very against people of other ethnicities that are not white. Here you can see this. This is a billboard in Tacoma, Washington, that was vandalized. The billboard, the original billboard, says there are Nazis in our neighborhood, and was put up by a group, Tacoma Against Nazis, and a hate group called Patriot Fund vandalized it with the image that you see down there that says, instead of Nazis, it says there are illegal aliens in our neighborhood. So what we do at ADL, as I was mentioning at the beginning, is we have a center on extremism that exposes the anti-immigrant and xenophobic rhetoric of these groups. And we share this with elected officials, law enforcement, etc. Their goal, all these hateful anti-immigrant white supremacist groups, their goal is to end legal and undocumented immigration to the country. That's their goal. And keep the nation white. That's how they see America. That America belongs to the white people, and that's how they want to keep it. Here's another example. You see, this is from the National Alliance. This sticker was found in New Orleans in 2019. And when I say that you can do something, one of the things that the community members can really help us with is every time you see a flyer, sticker, something of this nature, to take a picture and let us know is very, very helpful for everything our Center on Extremism does. So you see how they believe that this is about race. This, the whole thing is about a racial war between whites and non-whites, and they want to keep the nation white. So this is their the way they think. Okay. I'm sorry, let me move this. I don't know why this is not. Okay, here. Anti-Semitism. I was telling you that at the heart of white supremacy ideology is anti-Semitism. They see Jews as responsible for all the ills of America, and mainly for bringing and celebrating diversity, for bringing and helping refugees come to the US. And the whole idea of diversity and multiculturalism, they see it as a very, very negative thing for them. They promote all these conspiracy theories that say that Jews control the banks, Jews control the media. They're always promoting these ideas. Here, you probably remember then in October of 2018, this person came into the Tree of Life synagogue and murdered 11 people who were at the synagogue. He posted a lot of anti-Semitic but also xenophobic anti-immigrant stuff online. And he chose this synagogue specifically because this synagogue a week before had a special service to support refugees and immigrants. So there's this connection between the anti-Semitism and also the anti-immigrant rhetoric in these groups. It's really important to just highlight that. This was, of course, the worst attack on the Jewish community, but it was also fueled by anti-immigrant beliefs. It's also at the heart, of the way they think. It's also this anti-Muslim sentiment. They see Muslims as people that do not integrate into America, and they see them as a group that is trying to bring Sharia law to the US. So there's a lot of anti-Muslim Islamophobia in these groups as well. This is a picture from the New Jersey European Heritage Association. This is a barbecue that they had. You can see the language. They talk about the wall, and it's very anti-DACA as well, extremely anti-DACA. They started in New Jersey, but now they expanded their operations. They're doing stuff all over the country. They see the U.S. as being overrun by an invasion of immigrants. And it's really important. The topic of invasion is going to come again and again and again. And we hear it all the time. It's about defending the country and the white race from an invasion of people who are not white. The issue of illnesses, it has become more and more important with the COVID-19 pandemic. It started before, it's just that it really got a momentum now that we are all dealing with a pandemic. But the topic of immigrants bringing diseases, we've heard it for many years. Those of you who remember the H1N1 breakout in 2009, we also saw a rise in this anti-immigrant rhetoric around the H1N1, but we've heard it with Ebola, with measles, with all kinds of illnesses. Right now with coronavirus, it has really taken off. Like we see images like of a corona beer that says that, you know, Mexicans are bringing the virus. We hear things like closed borders it's the best vaccine, or open borders is the virus, this kind of rhetoric that just points that immigration is the reason why we have this outbreak. There's the topic of crime. You know, it's always there. You know, immigrants bring crime and drugs into the country. We hear it all the time. This is a poster by American Identity Movement. Some of you might remember the case of Kate Sindy that was murdered in San Francisco by an undocumented immigrant that had been deported before. That happened in 2015. In 2017, he was acquitted of the crime. And that's when all these groups started doing these demonstrations. But as you can see from this image, you see on the left faces of young white women who have been murdered, and then the images of people of color on the right, and it says diversity kills. So they're always pushing this idea that diversity and multiculturalism, what they bring is crime and drugs to the country. So it's important that they're always pushing this, and this resonates. They take one case and they make it as a general case for all immigrants. They take cases that are real, but they're very singular, and they generalize them. Here you can see flyers. One of the ways that these groups operate is by showing big banners and by flyering. We have recorded like an increment in flyering from these groups in the last years that is really exponential. The flyers help them recruit young people. They go into a lot of college campuses to recruit students. You can see the language in these flyers. They ask people as their civic duty to report people who don't have papers. They even in some of the flyers provide ICE. Oh, you can see it on the left. It says call ICE, and there's a 8600 number. So they're always trying to bring more people into their ideology and to get people to report people that don't have papers. I have this slide on the Great Replacement because this was an essay that was written by a French person that talks about the dangers of how people from Africa and from the Middle East moving into Europe is creating this situation for white Europeans where they will be extinct. This idea of the Great Replacement has resonated a lot with white supremacists in all the world. I mean, we've seen the perpetrator of the massive attack on the mosques in New Zealand called his manifesto the Great Replacement. So this resonates with all these groups. You can see what's their ideology. So something like this really resonates with them. Okay, so this is one of invasion, replacement. Those are words that really resonates with these groups. And well, as you know, the attacker who came to the Walmart in El Paso posted. A lot of these groups post online, so we see a big problem with not only hate on the ground, but as I said, hate online. And he talked about invasion. He was targeting, as we know, he traveled miles and miles because he wanted to target a binational community. He wanted to target Mexican Americans, Latinos, and that's why he went there. So these topics of replacement, invasion, that's what motivated him. And he clearly posts in his manifesto all these themes. So as I said, we have seen, our Center on Extremism has seen 18 plots by extremists that, thank God, never were successful. But the fact that we haven't seen such a horrible attack since El Paso doesn't mean that these haters are not planning such things. And I think this presentation is always extremely depressing, and I just want always to end with the knowledge that when we talk about extremists, we're talking about the fringes of society, not like these are people on the fringes, and most people, a lot of people believe that refugees, immigrants are welcome to America, that America is a nation of immigrants, those are our values, and we should uphold those values. Lastly, I want to just mention that we have in our ADL.org website a special landing page with all the resources that we created for El Paso. We have a new blog from our Center on Extremism. We have a video that several community members from El Paso and from LULAC collaborated with us. We have resources, educational resources, and calls to action. So if you want to visit our special El Paso land page, please do. And also we have an ADL Latinx webpage with resources in English and in Spanish, a monthly ADL Latinx newsletter, and also Twitter in Spanish, ADLS. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and we can start with the Q&A. Thank you. Sandra or Cindy, do you want to start with the Q&A? Oh, yeah, there's a question about reporting. Yes, definitely. You can report to the ADL. We have 25 regional offices, and also you can make a report directly on our website. There's a button right there that you can just report. Depending on the office, we have several team members that speak Spanish and that can help in Spanish. Definitely, yes. The other outlet where if you feel comfortable or if you want to also report and there's help in Spanish is at the Mexican consulates. We have this partnership with the 50 Mexican consulates, and you can also go and report there in Spanish for people who are of Mexican descent or have, yeah. We're happy to help. I think that part of the where can you find resources in Spanish? You can go to adl.org/Latinx, and we have this information. We have all this information in English and in Spanish. Basically, what is a hate crime and where to report. What I was mentioning, we also have videos that help the community just at least know what is a hate crime. I get a lot of phone calls reporting things, and sometimes we have to hear exactly the case of what happened to the person. Sometimes it turns out it's a hate incident. As I was saying, not everything is, not necessarily is a crime, although it can be bias, motivated by bias. But we can help the community member navigate that information, definitely.
Hi, Monica, can you hear me?
Yes, Sandra, yes, I can hear you.
I'm sorry. I think we did get a question through our socials, how to counter the spread of white supremacy ideology on social media. How can we help combat that?
Well, one of the things that LULAC and ADL are doing together with other 7 organizations is that we know that hate and extremist ideology is very widespread on the social media platforms. And it's very hard for a community member. I mean, definitely report it. There are buttons there in Twitter, Facebook. I mean, there are ways of reporting. We are pressuring those social media platforms to do better by this, because we know that it's not, I mean, if you go to the website Stop Hate for Profit, you can see all the demands that the 9 groups are asking from the social media platforms, because in many cases they allowed hateful, horrible stuff to be distributed and disseminated everywhere. So that's why we have this initiative, Stop Hate for Profit. But as a community member, you can definitely take pictures, take a picture, and you can report it. It's hard to have them make changes, and that's why we have this campaign that we launched in July, because we need them. We as consumers of these social media platforms have to tell them that we need these changes, and every single individual can sign up on to the Stop Hate for Profit campaign on the website. So that's another easy thing for everybody to just sign their name to this campaign, because the more of the consumers they see that we don't agree with the way they're letting these haters just spread their hate, the quicker they will do the changes they need to do. Regarding the issues on the ground, it's really important that if you see something that doesn't feel right, or if you see one of these flyers, one of these banners, to please report them to the ADL. It would be wonderful. I mean, we have all these investigators, but these groups are flyering everywhere, and they're trying to recruit young people. Oh, okay. So the issue of free speech is complicated, because hate speech is protected by the First Amendment, unless it crosses a line and it becomes a threat, like a credible threat. That's the piece where it stops. But the reason why we want to stop hate speech on the social media platforms is because the social media platforms are not the public square. So they can make the changes to their algorithms to start stopping this kind of dissemination. And that's why we're trying to pressure them as much as we can to do those changes. So on one hand, hate speech is protected speech, but it depends if the place where let me start with an example. I always need examples to explain. So if somebody comes into a restaurant and starts telling, the customers, stop talking in Spanish, get out of here, you're not in my country, the manager can step up to that person and say, this restaurant doesn't allow that kind of language, please leave the restaurant. So that's what we want the social media platforms to start doing, because they're private businesses. It's a very different thing. You're walking in the park and somebody shouts at you, you shouldn't be talking in Spanish, you should only speak English, because it's a public park, and that's hate speech, but there's nothing, it becomes a hate incident. So it depends if the hate speech is being said at a private company or if it's in the public square. Most hate speech would be protected under the First Amendment. The only thing that crosses the line if it becomes a credible threat. I'm going to ask, there's been an increase in individual calling police. Oh God, I couldn't read that. Can you put it again, Eileen? Or can you read it, Cindy? I wanted to read the question. Okay, there's been an increase in individuals calling police on another due to their, oh gosh. Can you read it for me? I didn't get to read the last piece of the question.
There's been an increase in individuals calling the police on one another due to the color of their skin. Is that considered hate?
So let me understand. So they call the police because the person is of a different skin color? Is that what you mean? Is that considered hate? So there's no crime, there's nothing happening. They just call on police because a community member is of a different skin color. Is that the question? I don't understand it. Or do you
Can you repeat it, Sandra? I can't see the questions.
Or is the question referring to the case of what happened in Central Park? Oh, okay, yes, okay. So I'm not sure. I mean, it's definitely biased. I mean, there's no question that that person who called the police on a gentleman that was just asking her to put a leash on her dog and call the police because she was asked to put the leash on the dog, there's bias for sure. Is that, it's not a hate crime because there was no crime, but it's definitely a bias incident for sure. I mean, it was motivated by bias. There's no question about it. So that's where, remember that example that we spoke about, you know, a hate incident versus a hate crime. So it is different. There's a lot of hate incidents that happen every single day that are motivated by bias, but they're not necessarily a crime. So that's why one of our strategies that we invest a lot on is education, because we do a lot of anti-bias education, so we can make people biases. And we have to be very aware of our biases so these things don't happen in our society, and we're respectful of everybody and treat everybody with the same respect.
And Sandra or Monica, do you see any other questions? I know I would love, Monica, just for you to repeat again, you know, and I saw this on the Facebook Live, if you're a witness or a victim of an incident or a crime, what are the steps that you need to take? If you could just repeat that one more time.
Of course. First thing, evidence. Whatever you can remember, whatever you can record, it's really important to keep it. Even if you pull out a piece of paper and just write what just happened, it's really important. We believe the best thing is to call police, law enforcement, if it's possible, but we understand that not everybody feels comfortable for different reasons. So the next thing you have to do is to report it. So where to report it, that depends on, you can report at ADL, you can report at the Mexican consulate, you can report it with civil rights organization, and then take the time to understand exactly what happened. Was this a hate crime or hate incident? And what are the next steps that you feel comfortable moving forward? I mean, from our perspective, the best thing is to go to law enforcement and then start an investigation.
Perfect. Well, Monica, with that, I just want to say thank you so much for making time to connect with our LULACers for joining us on Facebook Live, for joining us via the WebEx, to learn about the different terminology, you know, what is anti-hate, what's a hate crime, what's a incident, and what is white supremacy. And I can tell you, I was taking a lot of notes. I had to go off camera, but I took a lot of different notes, and, you know, certainly I'm very shocked that, you know, just 2 days ago, there was this incident that happened in Peach County, Georgia. And, you know, surely I know that so many of our community, especially after the 1-year anniversary of El Paso, feel like they're being targeted, feel like their ethnicity unfortunately makes them targets here in America. And so I do want to express my gratitude to you, Monica, to ADL, to Jonathan's leadership and the entire team for all that you do to make sure that our community is protected, and absolutely however we can help in the 4 states that currently do not have any hate crime laws. let's put our brains together and figure out what more we can do. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you for any concluding remarks.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, LULAC. I enjoy always working with you, your team, and everybody at LULAC. I think what I want, if there's a message that I want the community to know is, first of all, that we stand in partnership. We know that the tragedy in El Paso, there are no words to say the shock and the horror. So we stand in solidarity. That's the first thing. And we, our condolences to the victims' families. The second thing is, I think there's a lot of white supremacist groups that are emboldened and people with this kind of ideology that feel emboldened. And I don't think we are America. We have to stand up and be together in coalitions with all our partners and do not let them feel emboldened, because the strength of this country is exactly its diversity. And we should celebrate the diversity and, just feel empowered and help our communities feel empowered. And the most important thing, that to have our communities feel safe, because if we don't feel safe, then we cannot thrive. So safety is super important. I'm in safety, and I know LULAC works on all these issues, health, education, everything. So safety is super important, and whatever ADL can do, we will be right there with you.
Gracias, Monica, otra vez for making time. And thank you again to our LULACers. We will make sure to circulate the recording of this video. So in case that you missed portions of it, I hope that you will take a look at the recording. There was a lot of helpful information that Monica shared through the PowerPoint, through the presentation. And obviously, if you can share it with other LULACers and other members of the Latino community, we would really appreciate it. Mil gracias a todos y buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Gracias, Mónica.
Gracias.